Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Łukasz Gutt. I'm I'm a cinematographer. I sometimes worked as a director, but I want to talk about Broad Peak. We did it in a special situation. We did it in the mountains, and I wanted to tell you how we managed to work in the mountains. What were our problems? I wanted to tell you what was difficult, what was easy. I will share with you the story of this movie, which is also important for me, taking into account the cooperation with the director, with whom I made my debut. I debuted with Leszek David. I really like to work with him. I like his sensitivity. And when I got this proposal from Leszek, the first thing I said was, of course, I had some experience in the mountains already. When I was still in high school, I did all those courses, including mountain rescue, certain mountain climbing, high mountain climbing course, and I did have a certain experience and in this topic, in the topic of high mountain climbing and mountaineering in general. My first reflection how difficult this topic is, how difficult and dangerous this topic is, because climbing is very non-attractive visually, and it's at the same time a very difficult tale to tell. And I knew that we will have a lot of struggles in relation to that. We will be struggling in terms of our storytelling, how to approach this story, how to tell it, and even a viewer who does not have any experience with the mountains, so that a viewer could read our intentions, follow the drama, follow the story, follow the narrative, follow the protagonist. So I knew from my experience, I knew what can the threats be related to that movie. Leszek knew them perfectly well too, because that was also he also had mountain experience. That's why I knew that for Leszek this film is very important. It's very personal. And the first thing that we sort of that we made as an assumption, we both said that we want to make this movie in the mountains. We didn't want to make it in a film studio. We wanted to make it in the mountains. We wanted to have the reality from the mountains. For us, this main thing, films that we were influenced by was Waiting for Everest, and Everest was a movie was mainly made in the studio with the help of CGI, whereas Waiting for Joe is a movie which occurred to be closer to us in terms of production. It was made in the Alps in the majority, and the action takes place in Argentina and high parts of the mountains. Because these Alps so we had this assumption, we confronted that assumption with our producers, who agreed to take that risk, because it was a huge risk to make that movie. Such movies are not made at all, or they made it's a very, very rare it's a very rare situation. So this workflow, how to make that movie, how to process, how to produce it, we have to sort of come up with it ourselves. We were talking to the directors we talked to the director of Waiting for Joe, and we were trying to gauge what sort of top challenges would be in the preparation of this movie, but also we wanted to come up with this, what sort of production approach would be the best. We were thinking about going to Karakorum. You have to remember that this story takes place in Broad Peak in Karakorum. Broad Peak is in front is opposite to K2. It's a huge mountain range. It's huge mountains, and in order to get there, we had to trek over 120 kilometers, which were distributed into 6 days, and we had to all get adjusted to it. We had to prepare to it physically to take that trek, and this is one of the most difficult treks in the world. And the second thing was that a very important aspect was a technical one, how to prepare technically, how to prepare this equipment, how to prepare that equipment, how when we had this empirical experience that allowed us to understand how does the equipment behave in extremely low temperatures. We put a huge freezer in the Helmska production hall and container. We put there all the equipment. We put all the technical equipment that we wanted to take with us, was just to verify. But the more important thing that we wanted to check was the makeup. So whether this makeup all the makeup things that we wanted to take, wouldn't they harm the actor when it's really cold, and whether it wouldn't be so that it will be sort of dangerous or detrimental, that we'd have to get rid of it quickly. So we have to test everything empirically. Our results were very varied. First of all, it occurred that cameras use less energy in low temperatures because they are not cooling. The batteries get depleted because they're cooling the cameras. I mean, we were astonished because we thought that the batteries, with these are like simple things, but they're so important when you're in place. If your battery gets discharged on the set, you won't do anything else that day. And in Karakorum, there is no electrical grid to charge anything. So this was like a positive result or positive outcome of these tests. We knew that these batteries will hold on well. So the cameras eat less electricity. Also, in terms of lenses, the whole equipment we had to check. We had to check the wind with the snow, which in those temperature makes make the engines and the lenses are getting iced, so we had to de-ice the engines and the lenses. But then we're protecting them in such so that the wind would not get to the camera. The production structure was the following. We started from traveling to Karakorum in the summer, not in the winter, which is also a sort of achievement. a sort of challenge, because this trekking was very difficult for everybody. It was a big experience, like an important, a big thing, but it was important for us to. So if we were to talk about it, if we were to talk about the protagonist who survives, we had to see at least an attempt to of the like resembling this place. So we had to have an actor with us in Karakorum. We had to have the actor with us in Karakorum, and we also have individual shots with the actor in Karakorum. But it was also about his experience from that place, so that he felt that place, saw that place, felt that difficulty, even the difficulty of covering this 120 kilometers in the mountains. It is an experience which plays which is was very important. This first trip of ours was dedicated mainly to the broad understanding, this contextual understanding of Karakorum, for us to see what Karakorum looks like. I mean, we made a lot of broad shots, like wide shots, panoramic shots. We had a lot of experience, a lot of equipment with that. We have a lot of equipment, but not really that lot, because we had to have climbing equipment, costumes. So this caravan, including the equipment and the people. I'm not talking about 120 porters. There were 60 or 70 mules, just to be able to transport all our equipment. And we covered it on our own legs. Nobody transported us there, and so in order to live and function at this level, you need to get the time to acclimatize yourself. It takes a very long time. So if we get acclimatized in a long time. So there were no serious illnesses. Although one of our doctors, we also had doctors on our team, which was very important. Then it occurred. One of our doctors got the altitude sickness. He was an experienced climber, so it shows that the altitude sickness can sort of afflict everybody. It's also a psychological and physical form in which you are. Of course, you can take special medicines for that. You can supplement your water, but it's a bit unpredictable. The intention to go to Karakorum was to experience that place, to make wide shots, contextual panoramic shots, making shots that entered post-production. However, what we really wanted to achieve was to create another set, the one apart from the alpine set, or the second or third alpine set, just to give another background that would give credibility to our trip. Thanks to the fact that we managed to get there, we got, first of all, materials, acting materials among others, and materials with the extras, with the double bodies who are climbing the Broad Peak. We could take photographs of Broad Peak, the area around Broad Peak, the glacier, because as you probably know, the base, which is under under the Broad Peak or under K2, like the Baltoro Glacier is the biggest glacier in the world. It's quite a far away walking up. We knew those places, of course, very well before we got there. We knew it from the pictures, from documentation we got from other climbers, and basing on those pictures, we also based our needs. We said, okay, so this is a very interesting place. This is a very interesting spot. So for me, there was a moment we were going through those, browsing through those pictures. I really liked how the first camp looks like. It is a sort of a very special one, and we took this risk to climb with a camera to this up to the first camp, so about 6,000 meters. 5,000 meter, for your information, is a base. The first so in order to climb to the first base, which is like a spectacular place, it is a sort of a synthesis of Karakorum for me. It's very characteristic. There's a beautiful view on Baltoro from the first base and the peaks around. There is a special, like a claw out of it that is protruding out of it. It's this stone claw that you can see from the first base camp. We managed to get to the first camp because we had to acclimatize. So the crew which took part in climbing to the first camp, you know, when you climb to this level, to this altitude for the first time, you feel you just want to die. It's a feeling far away from your, even you're not remotely interested in putting up your camera. So this is we did it all simultaneously because such climbing is very dangerous. So you never know how it's gonna end and whether we will be able to come back. The crew that went to the first camp, to Camp 1, were mainly double bodies who were in the costumes of our actors. There was a director, the cinematographer, and our collaborators who were climbers, but we also trained them from the filmmaking point of view, so that they supported us, because they were very good in climbing. They were also our technical support in place. I mean, throughout the whole Karakorum. So we were making simultaneously from a drone pictures where we saw our climbing double bodies against this, like, the backdrop of this huge mountain, Broad Peak. Then we were shooting the pictures in the Camp 1. Their descent was also made with a drone, so you had to use the fact that they're climbing. You had to use every possible setting of the camera. We also had a drone. Concerning the drone, we had a pretty big problem with Pakistan forces, because our drone guys did not get a clearance. It's a document which allows you to get into Pakistan or get into the Karakorum range. We didn't know. I don't know why we didn't get that, but the drones came with us. They were in it. It was sent before as a cargo, you know, so like a big package. And the conditions were good enough that we had a Bargil with his at that time under K2. I met with Bargil there, and the brother of Bargil was there with whom we discussed the situation, and he became our drone operator the operator of our drones. So that was, we were pretty lucky in this problem that we were lucky to have Bartek, so that he could cooperate with us. He has a lot of experience in terms of mountains. He doesn't have a lot of experience in terms of filming, but we had a chance to support him in this respect. So these were also, we had a lot of what you call it, we had a lot of adventures. So all the preparation was a long process technically, and project management, packing everything, putting everything in the cargo. Just imagine you forget something. We checked everything 5 times in a row just to make sure that we didn't miss anything, so that everything is sent there, and that so that we could go there, so that we do not miss something. The conditions were so that if we lacked the drone operator, but we found a creative solution. In the base, we met a lot of very nice people, great climbers. The atmosphere in those mountains, you live, your life is circling around accidents. The gossips are not who does what with whom, but who had an accident where, in Gasherbrum or in K2. Especially, well, also in terms of radio equipment, the Pakistani the radio equipment officers. These are the guys who are keeping an eye on us, whether we keep sticking to the rules, especially if we have the authorization to get on top of some mountains, whether we paid for the ticket to enter the Broad Peak, for example. Because it is so that for every mountain, if you want to get there, there is a special payment for that. But the life goes from one accident to another. The first accident we dealt with was an accident in which a Scottish climber, around 60 years old, fell down from Broad Peak. He tumbled across this big range, and he stopped somewhere in the Peak of Serak. If he fell below, there would be nothing to collect. There would be no one to save. So then everybody sort of rushes to save the guy. Of course, there are guys from the third camp, the second camp. They're looking for him. Bargiel at that time with a drone found this guy. So they were leading. He was leading this guy. Especially, he was leading the rescue teams, but he was also leading this guy towards the rescue teams. So everybody lives with such events, So we managed to save the guy. Of course, there was a huge party afterwards, and this is how it happens. It all happens from everything goes from one accident to another. We were the only team to have a doctor between 2 bases in the Broad Peak. So that was the first time where our doctors came in handy. Well, not to us, but to the colleagues that were present also there. During the second, there was a second situation. The doctors had to make an operation on the glacier. It is a digression which shows you a certain context of the world with which we had to deal there. Another stage of the shots were the filming days in the Alps, which were a typical acting shots. The difficult of producing these shots was, in my view, was not the physical problem or the mountain circumstances, but rather because I feel very well in the mountains. For example, I do have a comfort in the mountains, so I had no discomfort being there. But the most difficult thing for me was to get this to get the script to work in the mountains, because the script written by the script writer and the fact and how to translate these letters into these very concrete locations, how to build this feeling that the protagonist is higher and higher. We have this sort of sentence in the script that the protagonist goes along a ridge. He looks on the left hand China, on the right hand Pakistan. You can't show that. I mean, you have this feeling that you have so high in the description that you see the perspective. You can look to the left and to the right into two directions of the world. So now building this in a cinematic point, from the cinematic point of view, it was about the location. We looked for such characteristic locations and characteristic formation, stone and ice formation, so that the viewer would be able to understand that at this stage we are, in this moment we are at this stage, at this altitude, at that altitude. These mountains are so huge. There's they're impossible to encompass with a frame. So it's just a matter of interpretation. And if the protagonist is to introduce us to the mountains, is the protagonist who is to be our guide, and we should be empathetic towards him or her, it becomes even more difficult, because we cannot objectivize it too much. We are always trying to find for our protagonist in the shot, especially when you're doing a wide shot. We didn't succeed at all times. That's why this movie, which has a very specific narrative structure, it has the first part where we're in Karakorum for the first time with our protagonist. Then we have a sequence which takes place at home. I called it the family and home surroundings on a different planet, really. And then we're coming back to the mountains. And now the problem was when we came back to the same place, to the same location, even though a lot of things happened between the two trips, this world doesn't change much. Maybe, I mean, this crack looks a bit different, that crack looks a bit different, but how do you tell the story that you're coming back to the same place and not to bore your viewer to death? Our assumption was that in the first part we are very disciplined in showing the protagonist, and that the protagonist will be leading us, and that we're pretty close to the protagonist, and the mountains are sort of in the back, out of the frame, because we focused on the protagonist. These are the wide context, but they are also there's less and less of them. So then from the last sequence where Rebecca reaches the peak but doesn't come back, we wanted to show the majesty of these mountains and to objectivize it, show this spectacular character, which being in the previous trip before, where he failed to reach the peak because there was no good weather, there were different conditions, and he felt that he felt very strongly, because that cost him a lot of effort and almost his life, that he's almost got to the peak. But then we came back and he could see what he couldn't see during his first trip. So here we decided on two ways of storytelling and filming. In consequence, so the first one is closer. It's a bit sort of the environment is not really shown well, with a certain increasing narrative into those claustrophobic character, because we finally get into this hole, and with the protagonist would not leave that hole until he is there. And when we leave that hole, we have a opportunity, thanks to the fact that he's leaving the hole. We can show the context that this hole is like a molecule in this mountain. This human being is a molecule. He's like a drop in the ocean, totally meaningless against the majesty of those mountains. What I wanted to show you now is, if I'm able to do that, This is what I was talking about. We used this is what we did in post production. How we combined Alps with Karakorum. Of course, this material is a slightly a marketing one. It shows certain assumptions that we had here. The fact that this second background is alpine one, so this is true. There's snow. There's a very concrete light. The light in the mountains is very characteristic. It's very difficult to prepare in the studio because it's illogical. Because the mountains are usually, these are inclined surfaces. There's a lot of sort of sun glares. It distorts the classical and the logical lighting system. When you talk about certain direction of the sun and the shade, but you have a reverse slopes which where you have light reflections. To making that in a studio would be very costly and very difficult. So because you would have to work with very big surfaces, which could at least imitate the real conditions. The peak sequence, the sequence when they're attaining the top of the broad peak, was shot in 4 countries, in 7 locations. So working on this all being coherent, starting from the directions of the light to certain topography of the mountains, required from us maybe not documentation, but foreseeing what you could see in post-production. We were making documentation. We used for this mainly a helicopter. Sometimes we could make some difficult situations on the mountains. We were sort of landing on the mountains to find and use situations that we could then collate into this one mountain. Because if we went just on one slope or on one ridge, we would not be able to make it. In the movie, you remember that was a race against time. In the mountains, this is additionally an element, because if we were not able to make something and we descended, we might not be able to come back, because the weather conditions in the mountains are changing very dynamically and very, very quickly. So another thing that was key for me was the locations and information where I could film and whether there is a weather. On top of that, we had atmospheric conditions. We knew that if we have a shot on the top from the helicopter, we made a shot where Berbeka is on the top. That was Mont Blanc, which is the highest mountains in Europe, mountain Europe. Our fantastic French double bodies got on top there. I'll tell you also about the structure of the crew, which was totally different in in the Alps. We attempted 3 times to make this shot, because around 4 or 5 a.m. we could confirm the weather conditions, whether we can leave at all, and whether there would be conditions that would be the ones that we needed. So we got up 4 times, and then we said, oh, and then we just to learn to that we won't be able to do it, and that we had to have a plan B to shoot something else. Apart from the double bodies in France, in the Alps, were French alpine guys. These are guys who have authorization to secure and to lead people, to lead the civilians in the Alps. They have huge information about the mountains. They are jumping around those mountains. They are like mountain goats, alpine goats. They are embedded in the alpine conditions, and they were also the head of the guides. He was deciding whether we can go on the set or not, whether we can go on a glacier or not, because sometimes you have the weather changes into such conditions that does not allow the we're sitting for a few days with a crew because we cannot leave, and then there's a weather window and we can move on. Another problem was that the topic of many scenes is the weather, so we could not plan as you normally do in the calendar. You prepare the whole movie. Here we had to plan, and with the second director, who was very, very brave because it was very frustrating, we had to change calendar all the time. We had selected blocks, the blocks of scenes from the first trip, bad weather. So, for example, if there was a bad weather, we made those scenes from that block, and if the weather was good, we made we made scenes where weather is supposed to be good from the first trip, because it was all about makeup too, because the image of Rebecca changed. Then we made we took shots of the first sequence of the last trip, and then we also had to hunt for the weather, and good weather and bad weather. So this complication, it was like chess, where we met every day in a very small hut, because these shelters in the mountains are very, very tight, and we were thinking, how should we set up the next day? How should we set up? We had to react every day to the situation on the weather. And in such meeting with the second director, the effects supervisors, FX supervisor, there was a guide who decided whether we can go out or not, whether we have a good information concerning the potential weather. And altogether we were wondering, what should we do if we can't leave again, or how can we deal with that situation? So that was some sort of a chess with the reality, and many different situations which caused our plan to fall apart. This was also another important context, is that we were supported by a crew which treated this project very seriously, and because it's very difficult to hold up the health and safety regulations we know from a normal film set. So everybody had to agree that we will work in a different way, but there was no other choice. Only those people came who agreed to that internally, and then they had to confront with a lot of discomfort for some of people of being so high, because even in the Alps we were very high. and this is not all also. Uh, this is also quite difficult and demanding, because on the glacier sometimes we had to go for like 40 minutes, 1 hour to the location. We did it on foot. We of course had as ski scooter, where we drove around our equipment, or we used it if somebody felt bad. We evacuated them on a ski jet. But we were also Polish mountain rescue guys, because which also helped us organize the plan. They supported us from technical point of view, because they were so apt in walking around the mountains. He helped us with putting things up, taking things down. Every location was first checked and tested by the French guides from the point of view of security. These conditions have been changing quite a lot. If there's a high wind in the mountains, if there's a storm there, everything changes a lot. So one crevice that we selected, it disappeared after a snowstorm. So we had to look for a different one, because it just wasn't there. So a day before the filming in a location, the French guides tested the safety of the location, and then we could move there in with the crew. When the location changes, we together with Leszek, our mountain leader, and our supervisor, we documented these locations to verify their status. We selected them before, but these mountains were changing it all the time, as I said. So we were working non-stop with Leszek. We were walking around these mountains, and apart from going to the filming, we did the documentation. This is very advantageous in the mountains, because moving around is very good, and it's very very advantageous, because if you don't move, there's a very high risk you can get an altitude sickness. Another very big very big challenges for me was the night sequence, because lighting in the night in the mountains, especially in the context of the snow, the cinematographers, very well how difficult it is. The place we selected for our base, where we were shooting next to a glacier, at the Mont Blanc, there was a on top of the mountain that is called Bacherbronner. And that was a very good location, so that we could make night shots on the slope of this mountain. Because this switchback sort of cableway, it was a cable railway. So at the station of this cable car, we could set up our lamps, and we could satellite flood the slope with the light. I didn't know if it's gonna work, but it did. I did have a reflection from 12 by 12 butterfly, as we say, which was a backlight, and also to feel the wind, the snow. I also set the light on the biggest reflector I ever had, which was the glacier, and this glacier made this backlight. It was made this very organic sort of atmosphere, ambience, so that it was important that I don't feel this lie or this artificiality around it. So that was my priority, and I think I succeeded. we had a lot of adventures in the night. Night is very cold in the mountains. It was minus 30 degrees, I think, there, and our crew showed great resilience, and better than the mountain guides who were cold very quickly and said we have to finish, but they just didn't dress well enough because they thought we will back down very quickly, which we didn't. I wanted to show you one more thing. So if you have any questions, you can slowly start to no problem. This is Karakorum. This is Baltoro, the Baltoro Glacier. There are no such glaciers in Europe anymore, because I've seen with my own eyes what the climate change does. This one is huge. It's immense. This is the path to Broad Peak. This is the shot we did in Karakorum. Here you've seen that sequence also in the post-production VFX making of. I wanted to show to get to the wall of that range, and here where you can see the glacier is Baltoro, and we prolonged this perspective into Karakorum. Here you have 100% Alps, but I think we also had an sort of we processed it a bit. But this location is one. This is the first this is the first camp. I decided that we have to get there and we have to get this. This is also an element that I told you about. We have very characteristic elements of location, of set design, which allow the viewer to find their way in this topography to an extent as it's required, because so that we experience with the protagonist these scenes which were realized inside of the tent. We did it outside of Warsaw. We built this huge fridge, which gave us this natural steam out of people's mouths, and the frost, and these were made in Poland. These are Alps, and here, as you can see, we have a night scene. This was the most important challenge from the point of view of cinematography. Here our camera was covered with snow, and it immediately became an ice cube because of the temperature, and so we had like technical breaks, and we had to make pauses because we had to have human backup and equipment backup everywhere. Here we have the hole in the snow, which we made in the Alps on the terrace when we couldn't leave the shelter. We just built this out of snow, but also in a moment where we couldn't shoot anything else. So this is the next part of the night scene. This is a scene in the base. There was a scenographic problem. We had to find a helicopter which was from the period, but the Pakistani army occurred to have French helicopters. So we managed to get the one from the period. Okay, do you have any questions? Do you want me to expand on something? No, we assumed from the outset that we will have a second unit and a third unit. There was a unit which was doing the CGI shots, which was managed by Szymon Kapeniak, and these were the used for collating together these layers. And we had an ongoing second unit, and we were dividing the tasks between ourselves, because there was a logistics between, okay, we've got those actors, they have those actors, so they can do only this and that, or they can do only double bodies. But we didn't have uncountable numbers of double bodies. They were absolutely countable. So we had also, in terms of cinematography, I was working with Paweł Czyż. They made a great job there, including also drone shots, camera shots. So we had a lot of footage from them. The key, of course, was the first unit, and an interesting fact: it was very difficult to get a location which would be a valley, and getting on which ended on the ridge, which gets directly on the Broad Peak. I mean, it was supposed to be the Rocky Summit, and from Rocky Summit to later go along the crescent, the so-called crescent, to the top of Broad Peak. So we had a lot of documentation made with the helicopter, and we've managed to locate in Switzerland, so we could send a small crew there using this helicopter. We could land down there very early in the morning. We took we did several trips there just to be able to put this all together. That was a puzzle consisting of the fragments of the mountain, so that the viewer would, I hope the viewer didn't feel that they were following this narrative, so that it's smooth, and so that in order to get it smooth, we had to put in a lot of effort. I shortened this topic because I wanted to work on Alexa, also because of its capabilities and functioning in those in those high whites. Because from the point of view of cinematography, we're dealing here with a difficult topic: how to expose, how to keep. What should be the range of exposition for the whites so that they could fit in the range? And I knew from my experience that Alexa managed the best. It was in the time when we were just starting out. There was no LF. It was premiered just before our filming set. The big LF premiered then, only before we went into the mountains, and I didn't want to take it. Another important thing is because I knew that Alexa will manage to do things better were the optics. And the sort of narrative division of this movie in the optics in the winter, in the mountains, and the one that works down in the lows, so to speak, the lowlands. The optics allowed the protagonist to be slightly separated from reality, so that this short depth of field allowed to have him be very sort of exposed against the backdrop, which was to show his separateness, but also this process of adaptation after returning from the mountains. In the mountains, I used spheric optics, but large format optics, LF optics, even though I used a mini LF camera. The main thing behind my decision was that they're very focused lenses. The less you have to perform in the mountains, the better. In order to add diopters, you have to go to the tent. You have to hide yourself in the tent. You have to add diopters, and you have to go back. So we were sort of coming back with the. In order we didn't have to do that with Alexa. We could make a close shot. We could change our point of view. Also, I liked them from the point of view of aesthetics, and they have they were very. They had this ease of showing this mountainous space, and this was also important for me. Okay, pre-production. It was a long process, as I was at the early stage invited to this process when there was still, they were working on the. I don't remember how often. We had different versions of the script, and we had our own thoughts about it. And then there was a long period of development because the documentation in the Alps took us at least 1 month in order to find the places. Of course, this was not one travel, but maybe 3 or 4 travels. And I'm not talking about filming in the mountains, but the filming here. We had tests, we had costume tests. It was a long time in development. I can't tell you right now, but I can tell you this. I remember that the filming was divided into Karakorum 1 month. We had to go there, get into the mountains, which was also an adventure in itself. All then trekking and filming in Karakorum. Then 2 times 1 month in the Alps in the winter, and about 1 month of filming in Poland. Of course, it was done in tranches, so this movie was made over 3 years. Together with the pre-production, it's even longer. So it is so that these films are quite often made in are shot for a very long time. So the technology changes over the 4 years. So many things can change technologically, and the movies, especially such movies, are made over a very extended period. Okay, I think that I told you the most important thing. I could talk for ages about that, and I could make lots of digression and anecdotes and stories, but and there is like a big bag of stories and also expert things to say. But I wanted to synthesize this for you. How does one work in the mountains as a filmmaker? So I would like to thank you very much.